You do something about 20,000 times a day without even thinking about it. And every single time, it's a masterpiece of biological engineering. I am talking about breathing. Yeah, it feels so simple, right? But the story of a single breath, from the air around you to the very cells that power your life, well, that's an absolutely incredible journey. Go on, take one now. Think about it. Air just filled your lungs. Easy. But that's just the first stop. That oxygen you just brought in has a much, much deeper and more critical destination. So let's follow that breath and find out what's really going on inside you at this very moment.
Okay, first things first, we got to clear up a really common mix-up. What you're doing right now, the physical in and out, the movement of your chest, that's breathing. It's a mechanical process. But the whole reason you do it is for something called respiration. That's the real magic, the deep biochemical process happening inside your cells. It's the entire purpose of the respiratory system.
And this is why we breathe. Respiration is the amazing process where your cells take the food you ate, combine it with the oxygen you just inhaled, and break it all down to release energy. And this energy comes in a very specific form, a molecule called ATP. Think of ATP as the universal energy currency for your body. It's the fuel for every single thing you do, from firing a neuron in your brain to lifting your finger. This whole thing doesn't just happen at once. It's a journey that unfolds over 5 distinct steps, and this is going to be our roadmap. It all starts with breathing. Then the gases have to diffuse into your blood. Then they get transported around your body. Then they have to diffuse out of the blood into your tissues. And finally, we get to the main event, cellular respiration. You can even kind of group these into 2 big halves. External respiration, which is just getting air into the blood, and internal respiration, which is the whole process of getting that oxygen from the blood to the cells and putting it to work.
All right, let's start the trip. Step 1 begins the moment you inhale. The air starts its journey down what's called the conducting part of your respiratory system. This is basically a specially designed pathway to get air from the outside world deep, deep into your lungs.
But here's the thing. It's not just a simple tube. Not at all. As that air zips through your nose, your pharynx, your trachea, it's getting a full spa treatment. Little hairs and mucus are filtering out dust and germs. The passages themselves are warming the air up to your exact body temperature, and they're adding moisture to it. It's like this super smart, built-in air purifier and climate control system, all to prepare that outside air for the very delicate tissues waiting inside. Okay, so the air has been filtered, warmed, and humidified. It's traveled all the way down and has now arrived deep inside the lungs. We're now at the exchange point. This is the incredible place where the outside world, in the form of oxygen, finally gets to meet your inner world, your bloodstream. And this exchange happens on a scale that is just mind-boggling. See, your lungs aren't just empty balloons. They're filled with about 300 million tiny microscopic air sacs called alveoli. If you could somehow take all of them and spread them out flat, they would cover the surface of a tennis court. All of that surface area, packed inside your chest, dedicated to one single job, swapping gases. Now, how does this swap happen? It isn't magic, it's just physics. It's all about pressure. Gases always move from an area of high pressure to low pressure. The air you just breathed in is packed with oxygen, so it has a high oxygen pressure. The blood that's just arrived at your lungs from your body is low on oxygen. So naturally, oxygen just flows effortlessly from the air into your blood. At the exact same time, your blood is full of waste carbon dioxide, so it does the complete opposite, flowing out of the blood and into the lungs so you can breathe it out. Success! The oxygen has made the leap. It is officially in your bloodstream. Now we have a logistics problem. How do we get this precious cargo from the lungs to, say, a muscle cell in your big toe? Well, that brings us to steps 3 and 4. The transport of that gas through your blood and its delivery into the tissues that need it. So how does it travel? Well, it doesn't just dissolve and swim around on its own. Nope. About 97% of the oxygen hitches a ride on this incredible protein called hemoglobin, which is stuffed inside your red blood cells. Think of each hemoglobin molecule as a specialized taxi, with 4 seats reserved just for oxygen passengers. The system is ridiculously efficient, making sure oxygen gets delivered all over your body. And here we are. The oxygen taxi has arrived at its stop, a cell somewhere in your body that needs energy. The oxygen has been delivered. We've reached the final destination, step 5. This is the entire point of the whole journey, where that oxygen finally gets put to work to create the energy that is powering you right now.
Now, what's really cool is that your cells are flexible. They actually have two ways of making energy. The main way, plan A, is called aerobic respiration, and it uses all that oxygen we've been carefully tracking. But they also have a backup plan for when oxygen is in short supply. That one's called anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration is the powerhouse. It's the gold standard. It happens inside a special part of the cell called the mitochondria, and it produces a massive amount of energy, around 36 ATP molecules for every single molecule of glucose. Anaerobic respiration, on the other hand, is, well, it's inefficient, it gives you a tiny bit of energy and creates byproducts like lactic acid. You know that burning feeling you get in your muscles when you're in an all-out sprint? That's lactic acid building up from your muscles running on anaerobic respiration.
Okay, get ready for this, because this is one of the most fascinating paradoxes in your whole body. The very cells that carry all that oxygen, the red blood cells packed with hemoglobin, they can't use any of it themselves. Why? Because they don't have any mitochondria. They are basically just specialized bags of hemoglobin, running their own short lives entirely on inefficient anaerobic respiration. Also, they can dedicate themselves completely to their one job, delivering oxygen to every other cell. It's amazing.
So there it is, from the air outside, through your body's personal aircon system, into your blood, catching a ride on a hemoglobin taxi, all the way to a cell to become pure energy. This whole incredible journey will happen over 20,000 times inside you today, all on complete autopilot. The only question left is, with all that power being generated, what will you choose to do with it?
Welcome to The Explainer. You're going to take about 20,000 breaths today. Yeah, 20,000. And each one is this little masterpiece of physics and biology. But have you ever really stopped to think about what's going on inside your body with every single breath? Well, let's do it. We're going to follow one single breath on its incredible journey from the outside world deep into your cells. So it all kicks off with this simple rhythmic action you probably don't even notice. We're talking about 12 to 16 times every single minute if you're a healthy adult just chilling out. This is the engine that drives our entire story. All right, so the first part of this journey is purely mechanical. You can think of your chest cavity like a bellows. You know, the kind you use to stoke a fire? And the whole thing is run by one super simple principle: pressure. See, air is kind of lazy. It only moves from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure. So to get that air into your lungs, your body has to create a low pressure zone inside your chest. The big question is, how does it do that? Well, it's an active muscular process and it's pretty darn clever. So here's the magic. First, two sets of muscles get to work. Your diaphragm, that's a big dome-shaped muscle under your lungs, it contracts and flattens out. At the exact same time, your rib muscles, the external intercostals, pull your whole rib cage up and out. This makes your chest cavity bigger, right? That increase in volume instantly drops the pressure inside your lungs, creating a vacuum. And since nature can't stand a vacuum, air from the higher pressure atmosphere just rushes right in to fill the space. Simple as that. And what about breathing out? Well, here's the best part. Most of the time, it's totally passive. You don't have to do a thing. Those muscles, the diaphragm and the intercostals, they just relax. The chest cavity in your lungs kind of elastically snap back to their smaller, resting size. This shrinks the volume, which ramps up the pressure inside, and the air just gets gently pushed out. It's incredibly efficient. Okay, so the air has officially arrived in the lungs, but how much air are we actually talking about here? Let's get into the numbers on our next stop. All right, think about the breath you're taking right now. Just a normal, quiet breath. The amount of air moving in and out with that simple action, that's called your tidal volume. And you might be surprised, it's only about 500 milliliters. To put that in perspective, that's about the amount of water in a standard plastic bottle. Not a lot, right? But trust me, that is just the beginning of the story. Because you see, your lungs have these incredible reserves. So after a normal breath in, try it now, you can still force in a ton of extra air, right? That's your inspiratory reserve volume. And after you breathe out normally, you can still push out a lot more. That's your expiratory reserve volume. And here's the really brilliant part. There's always some air left in your lungs that you can never push out. That's the residual volume, and it's absolutely critical because it keeps your lungs from completely collapsing on themselves. This chart really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? Just look at the size of your normal little tidal volume compared to those massive reserves you have on standby. That's your breathing power, ready to kick in the second you start to exercise or even just take a deep, calming breath. Okay, So the air is in the lungs, and we know how much can fit in there. Now we get to the most critical part of the entire journey. This is the transaction. This is where the oxygen we came for gets delivered, and all the waste product gets picked up for removal. And this whole exchange is driven by a concept called partial pressure. Now, don't let the term scare you. Just think of it like this. In a mix of gases, like air, each gas has its own individual push. And just like a ball rolling downhill, gases will always move from an area where their push is high to an area where their push is low. No energy needed. And this table shows us exactly why that exchange happens so effortlessly. Look at the numbers. The deoxygenated blood arriving at your lungs is low in oxygen. Its partial pressure is only 40. But the air in your lungs, it's way up at 104. So what happens? Oxygen just naturally flows from the high-pressure lungs into the low-pressure blood. And at the same time, look at the carbon dioxide. It's the exact opposite. High in the blood, low in the lungs. So it flows right out. It's a perfect automatic swap. So, mission accomplished. Our oxygen has successfully crossed from the lungs into the bloodstream. But its journey is far from over. Now it needs a ride. It needs a transport system to get to the trillions of cells all over your body that are waiting for it. Here's the thing. Oxygen doesn't dissolve well in water-based liquids like blood plasma, so only a teeny tiny fraction, about 3%, just floats around dissolved. The vast majority, a whopping 97%, hitches a ride on a very special molecule. It's called hemoglobin, and it's packed inside your red blood cells. You can literally think of hemoglobin as the body's oxygen taxi service. It is perfectly designed for this job. It picks up its passenger, oxygen, where it's plentiful, in the lungs, and then it drops it off where it's needed most, out in the body's tissues. And how it knows when to pick up and drop off, well, that's just genius. Just look at this comparison. On the left, you've got the lungs. Tons of oxygen, low carbon dioxide, a little cooler. These are the perfect conditions for hemoglobin to grab onto oxygen and hold on tight. But then look at the right, your active body tissues. They're low on oxygen, they're full of CO2 from working hard, and they're a bit warmer. In these conditions, hemoglobin's grip on oxygen actually weakens, forcing it to let go of its precious cargo right where it's needed most. It's an absolutely beautiful, responsive system. And it's super efficient too. Every 100 milliliters of that oxygenated blood, that's not very much, can deliver about 5 milliliters of pure oxygen to your tissues. So with every single pump of your heart, this delivery service is running, sustaining every single part of your body. So from a simple change in pressure to a complex molecular taxi service, the journey of a single breath is this constant, life-sustaining miracle. Your body is doing this elegant exchange 20,000 times a day without you ever giving it a single conscious thought. It really makes you wonder, right? What other amazing systems are working on autopilot? All right, let's get right into it. We're about to take this incredible trip, following just a single breath of air from the outside world, deep into your body, and then all the way back out again. You know, it's a journey that happens thousands of times a day, pretty much on autopilot, and it's what keeps every single one of your cells running. So have you ever really stopped to think about it? You breathe in, you breathe out. Seems super simple, right? But the actual pathway that air takes and all the little transformations it goes through are part of this beautifully complex and elegant system. We're going to break it all down step by step. Okay, first things first. Let's clear up a really common mix-up, the difference between breathing and cellular respiration. They're not the same thing. Breathing, that's just the physical act, the in and out, the mechanical process of moving air. Cellular respiration, though, that's the main event. That's the chemical process happening inside your cells where oxygen is used to make energy. So you can think of it like this. Breathing is the delivery truck that brings the oxygen to the party. Respiration is the party. So our journey starts right at the gateway to the body, the upper respiratory tract. And its job is way more than just letting air in. You should think of it as this super sophisticated air conditioning and filtration unit, getting that air ready for the delicate tissues deep inside your lungs. The very first stop is your nostrils and nasal cavity. This is basically security and climate control all in one. Right off the bat, these little hairs inside your nose filter out the big stuff, like dust and pollen. Then, the air gets swirled around these bony ridges inside your nasal cavity, which act like a radiator and a humidifier, warming the air up to body temperature and adding moisture so it doesn't dry out your lungs. It's pretty amazing. After the nasal cavity, the air moves into the pharynx, which is just the fancy word for your throat. Now, what's really wild about the pharynx is that it's a crossroads. For a split second, the air you just breathed in is sharing the exact same hallway as the food and drink you swallow. Okay, after that shared hallway, we hit a critical fork in the road. The air gets directed down into the larynx, your voice box, which is where your vocal cords live. But how do we make sure food doesn't go down that pipe? Well, that's the job of the epiglottis. It's this brilliant little flap of cartilage that acts like a trapdoor, snapping shut over your windpipe every single time you swallow. It's the ultimate gatekeeper. Once we're past that gatekeeper, our little breath of air enters the superhighway, the lower respiratory tract. This is an incredible, sprawling network of branching tubes, and we call it the bronchial tree because, well, it looks just like an upside-down tree that carries air deep into your chest. The main trunk of that tree is the trachea, or your windpipe. It's such a cool structure. It's held open by these C-shaped rings of cartilage. Now, why C-shaped? Well, that design is genius. It keeps the airway propped open so you can always breathe, but the soft part in the back lets your esophagus bulge out a bit when you swallow a big bite of food. And here's where that tree analogy really comes to life. The trachea splits into two main branches, or primary bronchi, one for each lung. Then those split and split and split again, getting smaller and smaller, all the way down to these thousands of tiny little tubes called bronchioles. It's this massive branching network designed to deliver air everywhere. Okay, we've traveled down the highways and the side roads, and we finally reached the end of the line. This is the destination for our breath of air. This is the most important part of the whole journey, this microscopic zone where the air we breathe finally gets to meet our bloodstream. At the very, very end of those tiniest little bronchioles, you find these clusters of microscopic air sacs called the alveoli, and they honestly look like tiny bunches of grapes. These are the functional units of the lungs. This is exactly where the magic happens. And the scale here is just mind-boggling. In each one of your lungs, you have roughly 300 million of these tiny little alveoli. So, why on earth so many? Well, it's all about creating an absolutely massive surface area for gases to be exchanged. In fact, if you could take all of those tiny little sacs and flatten them out, they would cover an area about the size of a tennis court. All of that is packed inside your chest, and it's all dedicated to one single job, getting that precious oxygen into your blood. So how does this exchange actually work? It's powered by a really simple natural law. Gases always move from high pressure to low pressure, just like air rushing out of a tire. Look at the numbers here. The oxygen pressure inside your lungs is high, about 104. But in the deoxygenated blood arriving at the lungs, it's only 40. That huge pressure difference literally forces oxygen to jump from your lungs into your bloodstream. And at the same time, the waste gas, carbon dioxide, has a higher pressure in the blood, so it gets pushed out into the lungs to be exhaled. No energy required. It's just pure physics. So we've seen the path, we've seen the destination, but what's actually powering this whole system? What's the engine that pulls the air in and pushes it out over and over again? Well, let's take a look at the incredible mechanics of breathing. The star of the show here is the diaphragm. It's this big, dome-shaped sheet of muscle that sits right at the bottom of your chest, and it is the powerhouse behind every single breath you take. So, breathing in is an active process. It takes work. Your diaphragm contracts and pulls downward, flattening out. At the same time, the muscles between your ribs pull your rib cage up and out. All of this makes your chest cavity bigger, which drops the pressure inside your lungs, and air from the outside just rushes in to fill that low-pressure space. Now, breathing out, when you're just resting, is completely passive. It takes zero effort. The diaphragm just relaxes and goes back to its dome shape. Your rib cage settles back down, the chest cavity gets smaller, and that increases the pressure inside, gently pushing the air out. It's as simple as that. And there's one last clever piece of engineering to talk about. Your lungs are wrapped in this two-layered membrane called the pleura. There's a bit of fluid between the layers that acts like a lubricant, letting your lungs glide smoothly without any friction as they expand and contract. Oh, and fun fact, your right lung actually has 3 lobes, while your left only has 2. Why? To make a perfect little space for your heart to tuck into.
You know, you take something like 20,000 breaths a day. Now let's be honest, we don't think about a single one of them. But what if that simple, automatic process is actually one of the most brilliant and sophisticated systems in your entire body? Well, let's dive in and see just how deep this rabbit hole goes.
From the moment we're in school, we learn the basics.
right? You breathe in the good stuff, oxygen, that your cells need to make energy, and you breathe out the bad stuff, the waste product, carbon dioxide. Simple in, simple out. Seems pretty straightforward.
But here's where it gets really interesting. What if I told you that carbon dioxide, the gas we've always been told is just cellular garbage, is actually the main character in this story? In fact, your body is way more obsessed with managing CO2 than it is with chasing after oxygen.
Okay, so let's get into it. Every single cell in your body is constantly producing carbon dioxide. This creates a huge logistical nightmare. How on earth do you safely transport this potentially toxic gas from your brain, your muscles, the tips of your toes, all the way back to your lungs so you can get rid of it?
See, you can't just let CO2 dissolve and float around freely in your bloodstream. If you did, your blood would become dangerously acidic, and that would be catastrophic. So to solve this, your body has come up with this incredibly elegant three-part transport system.
So here's how it's done. A tiny bit, only about 7%, is just dissolved in your blood plasma. Another 23% actually hitches a ride on your hemoglobin molecules. But the vast majority, well, that's where the real magic happens.
That's right. A whopping 70% of all the carbon dioxide your body makes is chemically disguised for its trip through the bloodstream. Your body literally performs this brilliant little chemistry trick to make it safe for travel.
And here's the trick. Inside your red blood cells, you have an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase. It is one of the fastest enzymes in the entire body, and it instantly converts that CO2 into something called a bicarbonate ion. This clever disguise not only neutralizes the CO2, but as an incredible bonus, it creates a buffering system that is absolutely essential for keeping your blood's pH perfectly balanced.
So with this amazing system for managing CO2, how does your body know when to breathe faster to get rid of more of it, or slower to hold on to it? I mean, we're not thinking about this, right? It's all handled by this incredible autopilot system buried deep inside our brains.
Deep in your brainstem, you've got the command center. There's a part called the medulla oblongata that sets the basic, steady rhythm of your breathing. You know, the in and the out. Then a nearby center in the pons helps to fine-tune and smooth out that rhythm. But that rhythm isn't just set in stone. These control centers have sensors all over your body that are constantly monitoring the chemistry of your blood. They're on high alert, looking for one very specific signal that tells them, okay, time to speed up, or, all right, let's slow it down.
So let me ask you, what do you think that signal is? I mean, most of us would probably guess it's a lack of oxygen. That panicky feeling you get when you hold your breath for too long? That has to be your body screaming for more O2, doesn't it?
Nope, it's not. In fact, under normal circumstances, your oxygen levels play a surprisingly minor role. The main driver, the thing that gives you that urgent, undeniable need to take a breath, is the buildup of carbon dioxide and the rise in acidity it causes in your blood. Your brain is absolutely obsessed with keeping CO2 levels in check.
And look, just handling gas exchange would be impressive enough, but that's just the headline act. Your respiratory system is a true multitasker, performing a whole list of other critical jobs that you probably never even connect with breathing.
We already touched on this, but it's so important it's worth saying again. By precisely controlling how much CO2 you breathe out, your lungs are one of the main regulators of your body's acid-base balance, keeping your blood locked in at that perfect, life-sustaining pH of around 7.4. Your airways are also a frontline warrior in your immune system. You've got this amazing self-cleaning conveyor belt of mucus that traps dust and germs and constantly sweeps them up and out. And if anything gets past that, you've got specialized immune cells called macrophages patrolling deep in your lungs, ready to attack any invaders.
And I mean, think about this for a second. Without the controlled flow of air coming out of your lungs and passing over your vocal cords, you couldn't speak, you couldn't sing, you couldn't shout. The very act of communication is literally powered by your breath.
Now here's one that might surprise you. As blood passes through your lungs, enzymes on the surface of your lung tissue convert a hormone into its active form, angiotensin II. And this hormone is a major player in regulating your body's overall blood pressure.
And finally, inside your lungs are millions of tiny, delicate air sacs called alveoli. They're lined with a thin film of moisture which creates surface tension, kind of like two wet pieces of plastic wrap sticking together. This could cause them to collapse, but special cells produce a substance called surfactant that acts like a detergent, breaking that tension and letting them stay open so you can breathe.
So, you see, the big takeaway here is that breathing is so much more than just moving air in and out.
It's this constant, incredible, high-stakes balancing act that connects your brain, your blood, your heart, and every last cell in your body.
From the sheer chemical genius of the bicarbonate buffer system, to the neural autopilot that's constantly monitoring your blood, to the simple mechanics of your diaphragm, every single breath you take is a perfectly coordinated, life-sustaining masterpiece.
Ever stop to think about a single breath? I mean, it seems so simple, right? Well, today, we're going to follow one oxygen molecule on its epic journey from the air around us deep into our bodies to see how that one simple act literally powers everything we do. All right, here's the game plan for our journey. First, we'll tackle the big why. Why do we even breathe? Then, we'll follow the air's path in, check out the amazing gas exchange, see what happens when things go wrong, and finally, take a peek at how the rest of the animal kingdom handles respiration. Let's get into it. So, first things first, let's get right down to the most fundamental question of all. I mean, really, why is a single breath so important? We do it thousands of times a day without even thinking about it. But that one automatic action kicks off this incredible chain reaction that fuels every single cell in your body. We're talking from the neurons firing in your brain all the way down to the muscles in your toes. Okay, so this is a really important point. A lot of us use the words breathing and respiration like they're the same thing, but they're not. Think of it this way. Breathing, or ventilation, is the mechanical part, the in and out movement of air. But cellular respiration, that's the real why. That's the chemical magic happening inside your cells where they use that oxygen to burn food for energy. All right, now that we know the why, let's actually follow a breath of air as it starts its trip into the body. We're entering what scientists call the conducting zone. You can think of this as the welcome area, getting the air all prepped and ready for the main event. So first stop, the nose and nasal cavity. This is like the air's first conditioning unit. It gets warmed up, humidified, and cleaned. Then it goes down the pharynx, which is kind of like a shared hallway for both air and food. Next up is the larynx, your voice box. And this part is genius. It has a little flap called the epiglottis that acts like a bouncer, making sure food doesn't get into the airway. From there, it's onto the trachea, the windpipe, which has these cool C-shaped cartilage rings to keep it from collapsing. Okay, we've prepped the air. Now for the main event. We're going deep inside the lungs, into the respiratory zone. This is where all the action really happens. And you have to appreciate the sheer scale of what's going on here. We're talking about 300 million of these little air sacs called alveoli in each lung. To put that in perspective, if you could somehow lay them all out flat, they'd cover an entire tennis court. Absolutely massive. So how does the air even get in there? It's actually just some really clever physics. When you breathe in, your diaphragm pulls down, and your rib muscles pull up and out. This makes your chest bigger, creating a low-pressure zone, kind of like a vacuum, that just sucks air in. And breathing out, usually it's totally passive. The muscles just relax, everything shrinks back down, and the air gets pushed out. Simple as that. And right here, this is the great exchange. It all comes down to pressure. As you can see, the air in your lungs is packed with oxygen. It has a high partial pressure. The blood arriving at your lungs, not so much. So what happens? Oxygen just naturally flows from high pressure to low pressure, right into your blood. And for carbon dioxide, it's the exact opposite. Your blood is loaded with it, the air isn't, so it flows right out. No energy needed, it just happens. So we've seen how beautifully this system is designed to work. But, it's also incredibly delicate. So let's take a look at what happens when things go wrong. Generally, you can sort most breathing problems into two big buckets. First, you've got obstructive diseases. Think of this like trying to blow air out through a pinched straw. It's hard to get the air out. Then you have restrictive diseases. This is more like trying to inflate a stiff old balloon. It's hard to get the air in because the lungs can't expand properly. Let's look at some common examples. With asthma, the airways get inflamed and squeezed, making it tough to breathe. Then there's emphysema, which is often caused by smoking, where those delicate alveolar walls actually get destroyed. That massive tennis court surface area we talked about, it starts to disappear. With chronic bronchitis, the problem is excessive mucus that just clogs everything up. And pneumonia, that's a nasty infection where the alveoli themselves fill up with fluid, which makes gas exchange pretty much impossible in those areas. On the restrictive side, you have things like pulmonary fibrosis. This is where the lung tissue gets scarred and stiff, and it just can't expand. Then there are other issues like sleep apnea, where a person literally stops and starts breathing all night. Or cystic fibrosis, a genetic disorder that causes this incredibly thick, sticky mucus to clog the airways. And we have to mention carbon monoxide poisoning. It's so deadly because CO latches onto our hemoglobin, the oxygen-carrying molecule, way more tightly than oxygen can. It basically hijacks the transport system, starving your body of the oxygen it desperately needs. But hey, lungs aren't the only game in town. Our system is just one way to solve the problem of getting oxygen. So let's take a quick trip around the animal kingdom to see some of the other amazing blueprints for breathing. The sheer variety is just awesome. You've got super simple creatures like flatworms that just let oxygen soak in through their bodies. Then you have earthworms and frogs that can actually breathe right through their skin. Insects have this wild setup called a tracheal system, a whole network of tiny tubes delivering air directly to their tissues. And fish are brilliant. They use gills with a super efficient system to pull as much oxygen as possible out of the water. And what's really cool is that even among us lung breathers, there are totally different designs. We mammals have what's called tidal flow. Air goes in, air goes out, through the same pathway. This means fresh air always mixes with some old stale air. But birds, they have a system that's, frankly, way better. It's a one-way street. Air flows in a continuous loop, so it's always fresh air passing over the gas exchange surfaces. This is a huge reason why birds can fly at altitudes that would leave us completely breathless. Wow, what a journey. We've gone from the outside air all the way to the cellular level and across the animal kingdom. Let's quickly pull it all together and hit the key takeaways. So, what have we learned? Well, for one, respiration isn't just one thing. It's a whole process, from the physical act of breathing to cells actually making energy. Our system is built for pure efficiency with that giant alveolar surface area. And the whole thing is driven by simple mechanics. Muscles contract, pressure changes, and air moves. We saw how gases get transported, with oxygen grabbing a ride on hemoglobin and CO2 traveling back mostly as bicarbonate. And of course, we saw how fragile it can be, with so many disorders boiling down to obstruction, restriction, or infection. It's a truly amazing system.